Okie dokie. Let's get this started, shall we? So I got the new Nashville jersey today. No, it's not the one they're going to wear this coming season. I like the blue. And I thought, you know what? Why don't we discuss Nashville? Because, see, they went to the Stanley Cup final a little over a month ago now. And there was a lot of talk at the time about it's a fluke. It's a fluke. I want to be clear about this. It was a great run. It was no fluke. It could be considered a fluke if everything went to 7 games and they had a lot of lucky goals along the way. They manhandled Chicago. They beat St. Louis fair and square. And then they took out Anaheim. They met up with a team in Pittsburgh that was better than them. Better than them in goal. Better than them up front. And equal to them on the blue line. And they still were this close to unseating the defending Stanley Cup champions. For me, Nashville's run was one. It reminds me of when the Canucks went on a run in '94. When the Canucks went on a run in '94, they were the number 7 seed in the West. And it was considered this big Cinderella run. But what people forgot was they had won their division in 92 and 93. They were a very good team. They just didn't have a great regular season. And Nashville also, 16-17 was not a great regular season for them. Which is what makes predicting this so hard, because last summer, I predicted them to finish first in the division. And in the end, they were 8th in the West. They were close. If LA had put together any kind of a run in the last 20 games, Nashville misses the playoffs, and we're not here talking about that great run. So, while I agree there was some good fortune there, I'm not calling it a fluke. They missed Johansson a ton in that final. Do they win the Stanley Cup if they have Johansson? Probably not. But it'd be fun to find out. So let's take a look at them up front. You got Forsberg, Johansson, Arvidsson. That is just deadly up front. And I dropped my marker. You know, if I had a dime for every time I've dropped that, I'd have 20 cents right now. Kevin Fiala I've got on the second line. I'm not sure. I think Hartnell may initially get second line, and then Fiala gets second line as the season goes along. It's debatable, because what people forget about Hartnell, they all remember the crappy contract that he just got bought out of. Hartnell's still able to produce. He's not that old. He's not that slow. And he could definitely play on a second line with Bonino and Craig Smith. Now, I have Bonino on second line, not Järnkrok, but to me, they're interchangeable. Bonino, for the amount of money he's being paid, will get the shot at that second line spot. And it's funny because in Vancouver, when he was tried at the second line spot, there was mixed reviews for it. And then he went to Pittsburgh, played really, really well as the third line center. Now he's back playing second line. Can he do it? Can his production come up to justify getting a second line spot? Or does Calle Järnkrok knock him out of there? Or does Colton Sissons come out and knock him out of there? So one thing you notice right away with Nashville is they may be lacking a true superstar center, but they have 4 good ones. So David Poile knows you build your team down the middle. Arvidsson, Smith, Watson, and Gaudreau had a nice coming out in the playoffs. So I'm putting Gaudreau ahead of Aberg. Even though technically Aberg played more games, he may be considered the more NHL ready. I like Gaudreau a lot. And I would be very surprised if he doesn't beat Aberg out coming out of camp. On the left side, Forsberg, Fiala, Hartnell, and McLeod or Salomaki. Obviously, depending on who you're playing against, you may want Cody McLeod in there as your policeman, or you may want Salomaki in there so you can roll your 4 lines and every line has skill and talent on it. No offense to Cody McLeod, but he's not exactly an offensive dynamo. Not that Salomaki is, but it's all relative. And then you've got Hamanev down here, Edsel Edsel. I'll say Edsel over here. Bass is still down here, and Trevor Smith, who played one game, so I've got him on the chart. And almost any prospect, a lot of their prospects are in university or KHL or Jokerit. So I'm not penciling them into the lineup yet. But that is a really solid. Their center spot is really going to be their bread and butter. As long as these four guys are healthy, and if Johansson's happy, because the other thing too is, if this whole RFA situation between the two gets contentious and ugly, and Johansson's not in a good headspace, this could all fall apart. Benino's not a first-line center. Järnkrok's not a first-line center. Neither's Colton Sissons. Johansson is. They have to have him playing at the top of his game. Because I am going to go right ahead and admit it. I have them finishing first in the Central again. And I made that mistake last summer, and maybe I'm making that mistake again this summer. But for me, for what Nashville did and for what they've been able to do, I don't see any reason not to put them number one. Now, let's get into the part where people have argued with me this summer. Roman Josi and Ellis as the top two defensemen. Ekholm and Subban as the next two. And Josi could play with Subban. Ekholm plays with Ellis. You move them around a little bit. Because you have four very, very solid top four defensemen. And there's Alexi Emelin. So everybody... Not everybody, that's wrong. Let me back up. There was some dissent when I had Emelin going to Nashville as a really positive thing for their blue line. Emelin brings that sandpaper in there. And yes, Matt Irwin could usurp him. Irwin and Emelin are playing for the same spot unless Nashville realizes Yannick Weber is a number 7 defenseman and Irwin slips into 6th and Weber slips back into 7th. Coming from a Canuck fan, having Yannick Weber as your number 7 defenseman, he doesn't complain over having to sit out, and he's usually pretty good on a lot of rest. So if it ends up that Irwin wins that battle and gets into that spot, Nashville's still all right. And then they got Granberg, Boteto, and Allard are their 8, 9, 10. And Boteto gets kind of forgotten. Boteto had that nice run. Anthony Boteto had that nice run when he came up, not this past season, but the year before. Kind of gets forgotten, and he's kind of buried in Nashville because they have so much depth on defense. Their depth on the blue line is really, really solid. And that's all I meant when I said adding Alexi Emelin is genius. And they didn't give anything up to Adam. So it's a really smart move for Nashville. Worst case scenario, Emelin ends up being the number 7 guy and ends up watching games from the press box. And they've lost nothing to get him there. You know, and if he really is crap, and a lot of people said, well, Emelin's just crap. Well, then they waive him. No harm, no foul. He comes into camp. He stinks up the joint. They waive him. Move him out. Bring somebody else in. They didn't lose anybody to get him, is what I mean. Now, in net, there's somewhat of an issue. I don't have Mazanik on this board. I know I don't have Mazanik on this board. Because Anders Lindback has returned to Nashville. Lindback had the worst stats in hockey. Playing for, I believe it was with Dallas before he was traded to Buffalo. Interesting part is, Buffalo was trying to tank for Connor McDavid. They felt they were winning few too many games, so they traded out, I believe it was, I want to say Ellis for Lindback. But they made a trade with Dallas to get Lindback, and Lindback played really well for Buffalo. Lindback plays relatively well when he feels like his back's against the wall. And it is. This is likely his last shot at an NHL job. Now, the interesting part is that he's stuck behind UC Saros and Pekka Rinne. But Rinne, at his age, I mean, let's not get too romantically caught up in what happened during the spring. The spring was fantastic for Pekka Rinne. He played the best hockey of his career. He's still at an age where that drop in play is likely going to show up. Saros is a good goaltender. He got thrown to the Wolves against Pittsburgh, and he did the best he could. I think UC Saros is the future number 1 for Nashville. Saros, Lindbeck, and of course Mazanik, as I said, isn't on the board, but Mazanik is in the conversation in terms of number 3 in the organization. So, what makes this team a contender? What makes this team just as good as last year's, at least in the regular season? Well, see, your top 6, I like Forsberg and Fiala, Arvidsson and Smith. I like them as well, although I still think Austin Watson has untapped potential. I said it during the playoffs, I'll say it again, I think Austin Watson has untapped potential and could evolve into being a top 6 guy. Good sandpaper in the bottom 6 right now. He's reinvented himself. First round draft picks have to do that sometimes to make the NHL. He has, but he's still got some upside there. And of course, on the left side, Hartnell could end up in where Fiala is in that little box there. But this top 4 blue line, I honestly think that is the best top 4 in hockey. And there's people who don't like the way Subban plays, which is fine. The interesting thing is, I've never seen anybody say anything bad about Roman Josi. We all get distracted by PK Subban because he's the flamboyant one, he's the loudmouth, he's remembered for a lot of things out of Montreal. Playing in Montreal will put you in sort of a bubble in terms of the way the press treats you, even after you've left Montreal. And I think part of what I think people are waiting for with PK Subban is for him to come out and talk a bunch of smack about Mark Bergevin, and it's just not going to happen. Meanwhile, Roman Josi, one of the most solid, steady defensemen in the entire league. And Ellis? Oh, Ellis had a coming out party in the playoffs. Ellis was fantastic. Once you got past his beard and how amazing that was, Ellis was fantastic. And this Ekholm kid, not bad either. Pretty good all-around defenseman. Whether you like Nashville or you don't, and there's this divide that I noticed during the Stanley Cup playoffs this year. I don't know if it happens every year that way, and maybe I wasn't paying attention, but it just seems like between Nashville and Pittsburgh, there was this huge divide, and fans, there was nobody who was down the middle on this and just said, this is just great hockey. It was, you love Nashville, you hate Pittsburgh, or you love Pittsburgh, you hate Nashville. Or you hate Pittsburgh and Nashville and you're not watching. There was some of that. But for me, I still see Nashville as a first place team. They could very well make me eat crow. They finished 8th in the West last year. And in terms of additions and subtractions, Mike Fisher's not in that lineup. Of course, if Fisher decides to return, Fisher automatically ends up on this depth chart because Mike Fisher's not going to play anywhere but Nashville. And still sitting out there, Vern Fiddler hasn't found a home yet. But again, where would Vern Fiddler play on this team? P.A. Parenteau. Parenteau might slide into that right wing spot. But you really going to put out Gaudreau? So while there's guys out there, there's players out there that Nashville could bring back for cheap, their lineup's pretty set. And they have to be happy with it, I would think. Forsberg, Johansson, Arvidsson. Those are the 3 guys that they can't afford to see an injury happen to. Like I said, Johansson's injury, partly momentum and confidence, and just the overall strength of their blue line and of their depth, propelled them to make that series with Pittsburgh close. But man, they missed Johansson. And during an extended period of the regular season without Johansson, I don't see good things happening for Nashville. So good health is necessary, and a happy Johansson is necessary. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And again, I know there's people who don't like Nashville. I know there's people who think that this was a flash in the pan, it's not going to happen again. I am not saying they're going to go back to the Stanley Cup final. Being first in your division doesn't mean you're going to do anything in the playoffs. It means regular season, you're going to finish first in your division. You may not get out of the first round. So this is not my way of saying here's how I think the playoffs are going to play out at all. When I do these predictions, it's just for the regular season. Because there's regular season teams and there's playoff teams, and they're not necessarily the same thing. Some teams are blessed that they can be both. Yes, I acknowledge Pittsburgh, but some not so much. And these guys appeared to be a playoff team last year and not as great in the regular season. So again, let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you again soon.